presentation on decision intelligence and what's next in data analytics for SAP BW and HANA. And I'm going to have a session with my colleague here, my friend, Chandana Gopal. Chandana?
Yeah, thanks, Avi. I flew in from Boston, and I was just telling Avi we had tornado warnings in Boston, which we never have. So I think we've all been used to a weird last couple of years, but I'm so happy to be in the flesh in front of people. It's so nice to see faces again. And I'm super excited about the topic because this is something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. So thank you for having me, Avi, and look forward to the presentation. So what are we going to talk about today?
Excellent, excellent. So we've got a whole bunch of things to cover, and we're going to cover them, trying to give everybody a bit of an insight in the time that we have, which is not a huge amount of time. We're going to look at how to do more intelligent decisions in general with this concept of enterprise intelligence, or decision intelligence as we call it in a pyramid, but very similar ideas. And specifically in the context of SAP BW and HANA, obviously. We're going to learn how you can not only just maximize the value of the underlying assets, but what does it mean to use these technologies and these concepts in the real world. So I'll give you some examples of that, and also give you a bit of a discussion around the future of what's coming. So more specifically, Chandana, coming from IDC's perspective, is going to discuss enterprise intelligence. I'm going to discuss decision intelligence, and we're going to compare and contrast the two concepts, which are at the end of the day very, very similar. Again, how we get the most value out of SAP data. Give you some use cases. We've got a couple of examples we want to share with you, and again, what's coming in the future. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Chandana, and Chandana, perhaps you can give us an overview of enterprise intelligence.
Of course, happy to. So when we started this research project, and I started this about a year and a half ago, the reason I began to look into this is, at IDC, we do a lot of advisory to end users. So these are people like you who are in your day jobs trying to figure out how to use data and analytics in your day-to-day work. And we found a gap. So we'd run a lot of interviews, surveys, etc. And executives, so these are CXOs in an organization, they typically, like 90% of them will come back and say, we want to be intelligent, we want to be data-driven, we are going to be an intelligent enterprise in the next 2 years. But if we run the same kind of questions to frontline workers, right? These are the staff, and we ask them, how often do you use data and analytics in your decisions? We get a percentage like 30% of them say we actually use data to drive our actions. And so there's this big gap between what executives really want and what they have in their organization. And we realized we needed to dig a little bit further into this. So when I started looking at the enterprise intelligence framework, I approached it with this idea of human intelligence. Now we all learn, right? We all are human beings. We read, we assimilate knowledge from various sources, and we try to apply that knowledge in our day-to-day work. If you just learn and you don't apply, it's useless. If you just try to apply without learning, it's useless. And so that's a similar concept to an organization as well. So you have multiple data sources, right? You have data everywhere. So that's the first thing, where you need to synthesize that data. You need to analyze that data. And more, we need to analyze data from external sources as well, not just what's in our organization. But we need to get data from a variety of sources, analyze it, get insights from that. And when you get insights, you convert that into knowledge, right? And that's what you're learning from. So as an organization, your people need to be able to share learnings. Because we often see that learning happens very much siloed, right? You have the marketing group that knows what they're doing, you have sales, you have operations, finance, etc. Nobody talks a common language between each of these groups. So you need to learn as an organization. And finally, everybody, whether you're a staff worker or an executive, you need to have access to that data and those insights you need to make those decisions. And that's where the idea of decision intelligence, I think, comes in as well. Are you able to use data and analytics in your decision making on a day-to-day basis? And are you able to measure your improvement? So that's the enterprise intelligence framework. We help organizations assess where they are and be self-reflective, because we often find that you don't really know where you are with enterprise intelligence. And that's where I think Pyramid does a really good job as well. So Avi, do you want to talk a little bit about how you approach it and how you help your customers with accessing value from their data in all these different sources?
Yep. So not so much to compare and contrast, but why isn't that clicking? Hold on. Do that one. Okay, technical.
They-
Oh,
I think
wait,
we're
oops,
five
no,
minutes,
we're
yeah.
back too many steps ahead. Hold on, computer's jumping ahead. How do we do
You're
that?
good.
All right, great. So, Pyramid has what we call a decision intelligence platform, which goes a long way to addressing exactly what Chandan was talking about. And it's basically built on 3 disciplines. I use the word disciplines because it's really tough to explain functionality. There's lots of functionality. So let's talk about disciplines that we're trying to solve for. The first is data preparation, which is the concept that a no-code business user experience for ingesting, cleaning, fixing data. And by the way, when we think very much around the SAP ecosystem, this is of, let's say, lower usage because you typically are coming to the table with your curated data or data sources already, that being an SAP BW, InfoCube, BexQuery, or HANA database all ready to go. But there are plenty of use cases where people still need to take, let's say, unusual sources of data and manipulate them. So that's one discipline, the business of preparing data. The next stage is data science, which is the next big thing that everyone's trying to get their hands around and get their head into, is how do we take data and add that next layer of magic that is very de jure at the moment. We want to do machine learning on it. Again, this is all very new, very cutting edge, but nevertheless, this is part of the ecosystem that we're all living in, and it's going to grow in the next, it's going to grow forever, but in the next 2 to 5 years, it's the big thing. And then the last thing, which is something that I think most people recognize and understand, which is business analytics. What's interesting is that we don't often see all 3 disciplines baked into one concept. You see them as separate siloed applications or technologies, and different disciplines of users, or not disciplines, different groups of users doing each of them. And you don't really see everyone coming together and unfolding it together into one continuum. And if you think about it, the data pipeline is that. It's actually all of those things. In a big organization, not everybody needs to use everything all the time, but as an organization, you do. And more importantly, it'd be great if it is in one singular platform. It removes the friction, increases the speed, the governance, the security, the simplicity. The list goes on and on, of all the upsides if you could get it into one box. And that is what Pyramid is about. The decision intelligence platform is that. And what we're doing is effectively delivering on all the outcomes and requirements and the demands and the goals that people want, that Chandana was talking about. All those things that people are trying to achieve, this is the architecture, this is the software to pull that off. In the context of SAP, which is what we're all here to discuss, Pyramid has a very, very strong framework to connect directly to SAP. I'll get to that in a few more seconds, but it's designed very, very tightly around the SAP ecosystem, which is why we're here to present today, obviously. So with that said and done, what I'd like to do is flip it back to you, Chandana, and ask, why should people and why should companies invest in enterprise intelligence? What are the upsides that you can bring to the discussion?
Yes, absolutely. The why is the biggest elephant in the room sometimes, right? Because we often throw technology at a problem and hoping our problems are taken away or fixed. But we find that as organizations, when you invest in the technology, you really need to have a purpose behind it. If not, you're not going to get the benefit from it. And we surveyed organizations just to see where they are in this maturity around intelligence. And we found that organizations that have these capabilities, again, going back to my framework, the organizations that can analyze their data, that can deliver insights to everybody within their workforce, that can really learn from their data, those organizations have a higher intelligence quotient. So I'll call it enterprise intelligence. So this is like the enterprise IQ. And with those, they are able to focus on growth metrics. They're really able to innovate faster. They are focused on revenue. They're focused on profitability. These are things that are driving them, even in the last 2 years when we've had really, really difficult economic conditions. They have been able to grow and innovate. Versus those that are not focusing on it, those that are not harnessing the value of data, they are focused on things like cost savings. They are focused on, just trying to keep the lights on. And that's not a good place to be, because if you are in that space where you're not digitizing yourself, you're not really harnessing the value, and you're not being data-driven, what's going to happen is that these organizations that are in the green, those are outperforming you on a daily basis, right? They are taking away market share. They're taking away your customers from you. They are able to be more resilient because if there's one thing that's definite, is that this, COVID may be winding down. We might have emerged from the worst of the pandemic, but now we have the war in Europe. We have the inflationary pressures that are going on everywhere. We have a skills shortage that's not going to be solved in our generation. For definitely not going to be solved in our generation. The workforce shortage. So we have all these other aspects that are going to keep disrupting our economies wherever we might be globally. And so you really need to start saying, I as an organization need to be more intelligent. I need to invest in these skills. I need to invest in the processes. I need to invest in my data centricity, because if I don't, I'm going to get outperformed and probably going to be exiting the market that I'm in over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's the way we've been seeing the market evolve in the last couple years. And I think from going ahead as well, that investment becomes really important. And I think, Ami, you presented when we were preparing for this, you presented some really good case studies of customers that have been able to do this, that really are focusing on the innovation. So do you want to talk about that?
Yep. So I've got a really interesting use case to share with everybody. The group is called TFG. They're a global retailer. I've got a footprint coming out of predominantly South Africa, but they're in Australia, the UK, New Zealand. I believe they've now started in the North American market as well. What makes them very interesting is they are going after the kinds of things that you were just talking about, all those goals that they're trying to achieve. What makes them also interesting in the context of this conversation is that they're very SAP focused. They have huge implementations both in BW and HANA. They also have data coming out of other sources, Microsoft Cubes, good old Microsoft Cubes, an Oracle operational data warehouse, and a couple of cloud-based data sources which they're migrating to, which include Redshift on AWS. What makes it interesting is that their first problem is finding a solution that would do all the functionality that we've described earlier as part of the decision intelligence model, like we need a bit of this, we need to fix the data, we need a bit of that, we need a bit of machine learning to project inventory, the customer 360 calculations, logic around the supply chain, all of those kinds of problems that people in retail are dealing with all day long, and probably beyond retail today. They needed solutions for all of those, which is very sophisticated analytical functionality. And then, of course, the classic, table stakes business analytics. But the twist is this business analytics in the hands of everybody from the top down. These guys have, I've forgotten the term they use, but they have a dashboard that they hand in the boardroom to actually run the corporation that talks to everything. They've got data sitting from BW in this panel, and next to it something coming out of Oracle, and that one coming out of their Microsoft system, and this one coming out of Redshift. One gigantic dashboard, one panel. Oh, great, thanks. And the people actually running the organization at the CXO level are looking at that and driving their decisions daily. And the exact same content and data, and obviously in a slightly different flavor of it, is pushed all the way down to the store managers, of which there are something like 3,000-4,000 store managers globally, who are all running with the same URL on their phone or on a laptop or whatnot. It's one cohesive system, and they're actually making decisions on how to run their organization. And it's, I would argue, an intelligent version of that, because it's all tied into this very, very deep pipeline that they're trying to solve. And it has to be fast, it has to be simple, it has to be frictionless. Frankly, the people who are building it also want it to be what I would call no-code or low-code, which you hear about often, but is it actually pulled off, yes or no? So all of that is happening. TFG today is deployed Pyramid widely. They tried everything, including, for example, the good old tools like Tableau and Click. I'm sure you've heard of those tools. On SAP side of the house, they used SAP Analytics Cloud, SAC, and they found too many problems with all those little pieces. It just doesn't fit properly. And then we come along and we change the name of the game. That's how we're able to, from a software perspective, achieve the goals that you were trying to show earlier. And they've improved their revenue, reduced their inventory, increased their margins, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and all of that through the COVID era. In Southern Africa, which is obviously got a big COVID problem, they're one of the few companies that came out of it better going in than everybody else. Better. And they tie a lot of it to their intelligent decision making through that process, of which we'd like to think we played a part in that. What is the reality of achieving this kind of stuff? From your perspective, how do you think what does one need to do to achieve those kinds of outcomes from your perspective, Chandana?
Yeah, sure. And if I could just ask in this room, raise your hand if in your company you have one single source of truth on one database without multiple applications and without multiple data sources. I've never had anyone ever raise a hand, right? I mean, that's a rhetorical question because no one's ever going to be in that kind of a heaven where you have everything clean, managed in one source. It's always going to be distributed. It's always going to be diverse. The number of data sources keeps increasing. The number of data types keeps increasing. The velocity of data, the change that you need, that it keeps happening keeps increasing as well. The speed of change. So at the end of the day, we have a scenario like this where business is coming to IT saying that we need more data, we need better data, we need to be able to trust the data that we have access to, but we don't want to do the dirty work, right? We want to have it available to us, made available to us at the point of consumption. So when I'm making the decision, I have access to contextual, timely, and trusted data. Because the best data in the world is not going to help me if it comes 2 days late when I've already, when that ship has already sailed. So that's what the business is asking for, and that's what you have to be able to deliver to them. And as whether you're a vendor in the ecosystem or a services provider, everyone is trying to help the business get to that goal of being able to assimilate all these different data sources. One of the surveys that we had run, and this was in 2019. It's only gotten much more complicated since then. We had 30 new data types being requested per month from IT, right? So these are new data types that had never been analyzed before, external, internal, whatever they may be, but the business is demanding that. And the same thing, the new sources and targets, which means you need the integration that goes between those sources and targets. You need to be able to bring all this together in a timely manner, which is not a trivial task. So that lends itself to people like you that might provide the glue between the semantic layer between all these different data sources that can really then unlock the value that's hidden there. Because until you do that, you're really not going to be able to benefit from the investments that you've made. So Avi, you want to talk about how your architecture helps you do that?
Yeah, sure. So this is just a very simple diagram that explains graphically how we look at the world. And the secret sauce here is that box in the middle that says Piranha. It's spelled the normal way, but that's what we call it, Piranha. It's the name of our query engine. It's the secret sauce of Pyramid, which is the super fast direct query engine that talks to all the classic data sources and then elevates it up into all the different tools that you can use in the marketplace. Now, the interesting thing about Piranha is it does exactly what Chandana was talking about. So we can talk directly to source. If you think of BW and HANA, think about querying your massive BW instance without having to copy the data out of there. That's a huge problem. When you copy the data out of BW, you lose the business logic. You copy the data, the duplication, huge problem. You lost a single source of the truth. You lost the data security. Potentially, you lost other things along the way too. The data itself is now stale, right? And that's just BW. I would argue HANA is the same story. If you talk about HANA views and HANA calculated views and analytic views, the same idea. It's a slightly different flavor to BW, and some companies are using both. Some are switching over, some are one or the other. Just in terms of SAP alone, Piranha changes the beast because we don't actually copy the data. It's all done direct without losing the dexterity of functionality you'd expect out of BW. I always talk to people like, give me an example we do the BW. Oh, we're using it for financial analysis. Great. So you're using literally accounting style data? Yes. Okay, what does your chart of accounts look like? Well, it's this gigantic tree that drills down, it's hierarchical, and it's in multiple currencies, and then when I look at it like this, I want to buy year, and then I want to do a calculation, blah, 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 blah. What did you do in the past? Well, we wrote a BEX query for it, and then for those people who wanted more, we stuck it into Excel with AFO. And now we're thinking about SAC, and SAC doesn't kind of do it. And there's business objects, but that's 20 years old, and it's not really self-service, so we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So what have you tried? Oh, we tried to copy the data out, we stuck it into another piece of software, and then that doesn't work because it doesn't kind of do what we want. It's old, the story goes on. And then we're saying, well, how about we just threw the whole lot out, start again. How about you did none of that? How about it just worked point and click on the spot? Don't lose any of it. And that story resonates. In the real world, that's exactly what people really brutally need. And it doesn't hurt, of course, then you can put that side by side with your Snowflake instance on your SQL Server. And your data coming out of HubSpot and Marketo and Salesforce and the other 10 places you've got it. That's the real world. That's exactly what we're designed to do. And then all the tools that's on top of it, well, that's a whole story on its own, but it's almost irrelevant. There's no point in having cool tools if your connectivity and your functionality on the data itself is so weak. It's meaningless. So that's basically where we're coming from, from that perspective. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You speak to SAP customers all day long, I'm sure. And I'm interested on the top 3 areas that they ask you about all the time in terms of the context of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. And some of those are SAP specific, and some of those are general that I hear all the time, regardless of what you might have. But the point is, 80% of the work happens underneath. It's the data part of it. It's that's where 80% of the hard heavy lift lies, and then the top 20% is the pretty stuff, right? And the pictures and the dashboards and the reports and the visual analytics and so on. So you really need to work on that 80%, and that's where most of the challenges that we hear about come from. From an SAP side, it could be that you're running different flavors of SAP. You in your own company, that might be the case, or you might acquire someone that's on a different version. You still have to get data from that, and so you might have you may have a non-SAP application running in a different company. So just being able to bring all of that together is one of the top challenges that I hear over and over again. And it's never and this is again not SAP specific. Most large enterprise vendors will say, oh, if you're all on our ecosystem, it'll all work perfectly. I've never seen that happen. Again, that's the time I'll retire, when someone's able to show that in reality, right? It never works seamlessly. That's where you really have to think about, okay, what does my business want? What are my goals? And what do I need to get them those goals? Because if you don't get them, that's when they start going into an Excel spreadsheet from a data source that you've never seen or heard before, and they start running their decisions based on that. Never a good thing. But other security, other constraints that we hear, considerations that you have to think about are security policy restrictions, governance, security, all of those having that granular access and ability to control. Security tends to be one of the top areas that keeps coming up again and again when we talk to our customers. Budget constraints, that's never, again, good. No one's ever going to have enough money, right? Everyone's always going to be constrained and trying to do more with less. And that's where you start saying, okay, am I doing the right thing by investing in these 5,000 different tools? Do I need to rationalize and really think about, okay, what can get me the most bang for my buck? Can I, get 80% of the functionality I need with what I have available? And maybe that's what you need to make available to your business users so they can become intelligent in their decision making. Data constraints, we've both spoken a lot about the value of data and the challenges with being able to access that data. And then the list goes on, technology, leadership. Leadership is one thing I do want to highlight though, because I think having executive leadership support this idea of having intelligence in your organization, that at the end of the day truly moves the needle. Because when you have a CEO or a CFO or a CDO saying we need to have our business users have access to data, that's when money by magic starts appearing, right? So you really need, if you're able to get that executive support, that really tends to move the needle as well. And then everything else, data literacy, awareness, and so on, those are considerations that you really have to think about. Are you upskilling your workers? Are your staff, do they know how to use the data? Are they able to interpret it? This is not about learning how to use pyramid versus click versus Tableau or anything else. It's about the data literacy. If they see a chart, are they able to interpret it? Are they able to, do they know how to decipher the insight that's coming out of those charts? So those are all of the things that you really have to think about when you start embarking on this process of modernizing your decision intelligence or enterprise intelligence architecture. So Avi, what do you have to say to that? Case study?
Yeah, I've got a case study that talks to a lot of that. This is another good example. This is called Premier Foods. They're an organization out of the UK, a big footprint in Europe. I'm pretty sure they've got a distribution globally. A huge number of users functionally connect up to the system. And they had a problem. They needed to connect to SAP, as you can imagine, SAP BW. This is BW for HANA to be specific. They also had a whole big modernization shift to get their data up into Amazon Redshift. And this again is hosted in AWS, if I'm not incorrect. So part of their move to the cloud story makes sense. And to address some of the points that you brought up, again, multi-data, big problem. Have to find a technology that works across both. They had tried, to be very specific, they tried SAC again, SAP Analytics Cloud, which was relatively good on BW, non-existent on Redshift. They tried Tableau, very good on Redshift, non-existent on BW, not non-existent, but not really good. Then they came in at Pyramid, and of course we were out-tacked on both tracks and provided them with a consistent way to solve both problems in one box. So that was one problem, and one of the things we brought up is that, the multiple data sources. The second thing that came in is the security. Again, especially on BW, we are able to keep that in track. All the security constraints, which is a consistent problem we hear of most SAP customers. Our data is mission critical, strictly confidential. It's not just cut and paste, extract the data and hope for the best kind of stuff. It's really important that we keep the security of the data, which we've already implemented in our gigantic SAP solution, and now I have to go and repeat it again in some other piece of software. That's not a great idea. So that's a big one as well that we see consistently. The last one that you mentioned, which is fascinating, is leadership and skills. So this is a good example where it took the leadership of the organization to say, we have to solve something that works across both platforms. We had people from, let's say, an SAP-centric mindset being very SAP-focused, and those people focusing on the Redshift side of the house focusing on that. It took someone at the top to say, no, we have to connect the dots and make it work together, which I think is a consistent, or let's say not consistent, but it's going to be a new pattern we're going to see very, very often. As you asked a few minutes ago, who doesn't have multiple data sources? It is. The other thing that came up that was fascinating is the SAP crowd at Premier Foods was very happy with Pyramid. We were there to work with what they've done, not to break it or go against it. So we actually got to reuse their skills. The investment was leveraged. We didn't go there to compete. We went there to work with them. In fact, we enhanced what they did. And data literacy became less of a problem because everybody knew what was going on inside BW. We didn't have to retrain you on all the structures and the data and the logic. And it's there. It just works. And all of those things are challenges in the best of scenarios. Even with a pyramid, it doesn't get easier. But you need to do whatever you can to bring the temperature of the room down and solve it somehow. So those are good examples of how we do all of that. So in the interests of our time, I know we're right up on the edge here, according to the clock. What I want to do is take a few questions, and then we'll end with a few more comments, just to close the session out. So does anybody have any questions for us?
Go ahead.
Yes.
How do you guys, for, let's say, GRC, have you guys done anything for do the data analytics into GRC itself? I've not seen too many ways to connect to the GRC as the instance.
I would say probably no, we haven't.
Repeat the question.
Oh yes, we need to repeat the questions. How do we connect into GRC? You were asking the question. And I must say for myself personally, I have not seen that happen certainly on our side of the fence. It could be happening anyway, and I'm just not aware of it. But and believe it or not, we don't know what all of our customers are doing. But as far as I know, no. But I'd be happy to take that conversation later, and maybe we can have a discussion about it. There's lots of ways to connect things up, especially between HANA and BW. So many different pipelines can feed into different things these days. It's how long's a piece of string? There's many, many things that are going on. But I personally can't answer that one directly. Any other questions from anybody? No? Okay. So I guess, probably our last part in comments, I think we'll go there. Is there anything you want the audience members to take away? Anything you'd like them to remember?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, one of the you see an aha moment when you truly are self-reflective. Organizations often, it's not the technology that they struggle. I mean, they struggle with technology, but they struggle more with culture, right? So this notion that if I have access to data, am I going to be proven wrong, right? What I've done in the past, is that going to turn out to be, someone going to challenge that? So there's that mentality of being a little bit afraid of being data driven. And I'd say, get over that, because once you realize that there's so much more potential to be had when you are able to access data, when data science becomes available to you. Because all of a sudden, if you are say a merchandiser, right, and if you're able to use data science in being able to run some of your predictive models, it opens up an entirely new world for you. You're not doing things the way you are, and all of a sudden the value you add to your organization becomes exponentially more. So make sure your users are not afraid of data, and that you put the training that they may need in place. You put that education, and you give them the ability to experiment. Because if you don't experiment, you're not going to try new things, and if you don't try new things, someone else is going to take market share away from you.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you very much. From our perspective at Pyramid, one of the things we would like you guys to take away in a short sort of bite is, from our perspective, intelligent decisions require really good software and a platform to get it to work. In terms of SAP, we think it's a very empty market for making it really work. We'd make an argument there aren't many tools that do it well. And we really think, as Chanjana said, that a good intelligence or decision intelligence platform can open up doors that you can't possibly imagine and actually drive access to many more users than just the typical small group of people, maybe in the basement, maybe not, who knows. But, people that, just don't see sunlight. You can bring it out to many more people. For that, it's got to be accessible, no code, easy, but still fully functional and very, very fast. When you connect technology like that with human interactions and human intelligence, as you were saying, the change is profound. And we can show case upon case of that happening. So it's a very, very interesting conversation. With that, I'll leave you with one last slide here. First of all, both of us will be at our stand. We have a booth 12:45, if you can find us. We're in some corner somewhere. I'd like to say we're near the food. We have a food stand next to us. But I think there's a lot of food stands. Our food stands are better, of course. But anyway, so come and have a chat to us. We've got a bunch of people who'd love to have a chat with you, do a quick demo. Seeing is believing. 5 minutes is all it takes to actually see what we mean. I think you'll be absolutely shocked at the difference that Pyramid itself can make, and also starting to deliver on some of the ideas that both of us spoken about today. There's another session tomorrow. We've got 4 sessions at this conference. Apparently, we've got lots of things to tell you. So if you want to come and hear more from us, please do pop by tomorrow. We're doing a session with AWS on implementing Pyramid, SAP, and in AWS space. It's a very interesting conversation. And with that, we're also giving away T-shirts. We want many more people to walk around in these. As you can see, we've got a few people here. That way we know who you are. We'll find you. Everyone else is wearing black and grey, and it's time to pop open with its bright colors. This is where it's happening, people. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great conference.